My dad called his affair partner a future grandmother at my baby shower and expected me to just smile and accept it. Her mom is lying in a nursing home right now, unable to care for herself, unable to be who she used to be, and her dad is trying to bring the woman he has been sleeping with to her baby shower and introduce her as a potential grandmother to her unborn child. Let that sink in for a second. Her mom is still alive. She is right there. And her dad wants to replace her at a baby shower. This is one of those stories where every new detail makes your jaw drop just a little further, and by the end you are sitting there wondering how one family ended up carrying this much pain all at the same time. So let us go back to where this started, because the beginning is important. About a year ago, this young woman's mother was in a serious car accident. Not a minor fender bender, not something she bounced back from in a few weeks with some rest and physical therapy. A traumatic brain injury that changed everything, all at once, with no warning and no chance to prepare. Her mom ended up in a nursing home, needing help with basically everything, and the person she had been before the accident was in many ways gone. The laugh, the habits, the way she used to hold a conversation, the way she made a room feel like home. All of it altered beyond recognition. That is devastating on its own. That is the kind of loss that reshapes a family from the inside out, quietly and completely, like water finding every crack in a foundation. Grief does not always come with a funeral. Sometimes it sits in a nursing home bed and looks back at you with unfamiliar eyes, and that might actually be harder to process than a clear ending, because there is no permission to fully mourn, no moment where the world stops and acknowledges what has been lost. Now, the daughters in this family had grown up knowing they were always welcome at their parents' home. The door was open, the key was theirs to use, and that was just the understood agreement between them. It was not a formal arrangement. It was just the warmth of a family that trusted each other, the kind of thing you do not even think about because it has always been true. So imagine being this woman, living nearby, still stopping in the way she always had, still treating that house as the place it had always been, and suddenly getting a call from her dad telling her she needs to call ahead from now on because he has found himself a sex partner and he does not want her walking in on them. Not a girlfriend. He was very clear about that distinction, almost proudly so. Just someone to sleep with. Because her mom was not who she used to be, and he needed someone to fill that space. I need to pause here for a second. His wife is in a nursing home. She is not gone. She did not leave him. And he is using the fact of her injury, the fact of her need, as the justification for bringing someone else into their home. That home. The one his daughters grew up in. The one their mom decorated and cooked in and made into something that felt like theirs. Now, reasonable people can have complicated feelings about what a spouse is supposed to do when their partner suffers a life-altering injury. That is genuinely murky emotional territory, and there are no clean or easy answers sitting at the bottom of it. People are human. Loneliness is real. The grief of watching someone you love become someone you no longer fully recognize is a specific and brutal kind of suffering. But the way this dad handled it was not careful or sensitive or even privately painful. He announced it. He did not sit his daughters down gently and say, "This is something I am struggling with and I need to be honest with you." He told them, essentially, "Do not walk in on me." That is how they found out. A practical heads up. A logistical warning. Delivered as casually as if he were telling them he had started a new hobby. The daughters were understandably upset. They gave him a hard time about it, which honestly seems like the most normal reaction imaginable. You find out your dad is sleeping with someone in your childhood home while your mom is in a nursing home, and your feelings about that are not supposed to be complicated? Of course they were complicated. Of course there was pushback. And to his credit, he did address it. He got everyone on a video call and laid out his position slowly and deliberately. He said this woman is not his girlfriend. He said she would never be his girlfriend. He said they both love their spouses and this is simply about meeting a need, filling a gap, nothing more. He said it would never affect his daughters because she would never be part of the family. He looked his kids in the eyes, or at least in the camera, and made a promise with apparent conviction that this situation had a clear and contained boundary, and that they had nothing to worry about. And that promise did not last very long, did it? What happened next is where this story shifts from painful to genuinely surreal. Somewhere along the way, during their time together, this woman started opening up about her own sadness. Her husband has dementia. She feels alone. She does not have the family connection she once had with him, and the grief of that has left her isolated in ways she was not expecting. And this man, who had promised his daughters with apparent sincerity that this woman would never become part of their lives, decided that the solution to her loneliness was to absorb her into his family. Just like that. With no conversation, no warning, no acknowledgement that he was about to completely contradict everything he had said. The woman he said would never be a girlfriend, never be a part of the family, never affect his children, was now being nominated to attend his daughter's baby shower and potentially become a grandmother figure to his unborn grandchild. A child who had not even entered the world yet. A child who already had a grandmother, lying in a nursing home bed. There is a word for what happens when someone makes a clear promise and then quietly expands the terms without asking anyone else first. It is called a boundary violation. And this one is particularly striking because the promise was so specific, so deliberate, so seemingly designed to reassure. He did not say things might evolve. He did not say let us take it one day at a time and see how everyone feels. He said she will never affect you. Full stop. No asterisks, no conditions, no footnotes. And now here he is, a handful of months later, essentially asking his pregnant daughter to make room at her baby shower for this stranger and to consider letting her play grandmother to a baby that has not even been born yet. The ask is almost breathtaking in how casually it was made, as if the promise had simply never happened. The audacity of that request is hard to overstate. A baby shower is not a casual family dinner where you can squeeze in an extra chair and everyone just adjusts. It is an intimate and deliberate celebration built around the mother-to-be and the people who have been woven into her life and her child's story from the very beginning. Every person in that room carries meaning. Every seat at that table is a statement about who belongs. And this woman, through absolutely no fault of her own, is a living symbol of everything that has gone wrong in this family over the past year. Her presence at that shower would not just be awkward. It would not just be a little uncomfortable and then fine. It would be a statement. It would say that this is who we are now. It would say that the new normal has been decided, and everyone here is expected to smile and go along with it and ask no further questions. This young woman said no. Good. She should have said no. And her sisters backed her up, which honestly must have been such a relief, because it would have been very easy to feel completely alone in this moment, to wonder if she was being unreasonable, to second-guess herself into the ground. The sisters even pointed out the very thing that needed to be said, which is that Dad himself promised this would never affect them. They held him to his own words, calmly and directly. That is not drama. That is not being difficult. That is accountability, and it was exactly what the moment called for. She mentioned feeling worried that this situation might drive her and her dad apart, and I want to sit with that for a moment because it says so much about who she is. She is pregnant. She is already carrying the grief of her mother's condition. She is navigating all of that while also preparing for one of the biggest transitions of her life. And even after all of this, even after he tried to bulldoze her baby shower with this request, she is the one worried about the relationship. She is the one asking how to handle it carefully so things do not fall apart between them. That kind of emotional generosity, especially in the middle of everything she is holding right now, deserves to be named and recognized. But here is what also needs to be named. Her dad is not behaving like someone who is worried about the relationship. He is behaving like someone who has decided what he wants and is genuinely frustrated that his family is not simply falling into line. He tried to get her sisters on his side. He framed her refusal as a lack of support for him, rather than a completely understandable response to an overreach. He is characterizing her reasonable boundary as her being difficult, when the actual difficult thing here is what he has been putting his family through since the accident, quietly and consistently and without much apparent reflection. Let us also talk about what is not being talked about in this situation, which is the mom. This woman is 25 years old, pregnant with her first child, and her mother is lying in a nursing home with a traumatic brain injury. Her mother cannot be there the way a mother would normally be there for her daughter's baby shower. She cannot sit across the table and hold her hand and cry happy tears and talk about what it was like when her daughter was born. That loss is already present in every corner of this celebration before it has even happened. That grief is already in the room, quiet and heavy and real. And her dad, instead of acknowledging that weight, instead of leaning into the family bonds that could help everyone carry something this hard together, decided to introduce a stranger and call her a potential grandmother. As if the position were simply vacant. As if the mom being different now meant the role was open for whoever was available. That framing is what makes this genuinely painful beyond just the logistics or the awkwardness. It is not about whether this woman he is seeing is a good person. She might be perfectly kind and well-meaning and doing her best in a hard situation. This is not really about her at all. It is about what the whole thing communicates to a daughter who is already grieving her mother in a deeply complicated, ambiguous, and ongoing way. It says your mom does not count anymore. It says the family has moved on. It says the person who should be celebrated at your baby shower has been quietly set aside and you are supposed to be fine with that because life is complicated and adults have needs. She is not wrong for not being fine with that. Now let us talk about what the right call is here, because I think it is actually pretty clear. She made the right decision by saying no to this woman attending the shower. That was the correct answer, delivered with complete reasonableness, backed up by her own sisters, and grounded in a promise her father made with his own mouth. She does not owe this woman access to her pregnancy, her celebration, or her child. She does not have to be cruel or cold about it, but she absolutely gets to hold that line without apology. The harder question is what happens with her dad going forward, and that is genuinely complicated. Because he is also someone who is hurting. He watched his wife change in ways that are irreversible. He wakes up every day knowing that the life he thought he was living has been fundamentally rearranged by something that was not anyone's fault. He is grieving too, just in a different direction, in a way that has led him toward his own needs rather than toward his family's. And he has clearly made some choices along the way that were more about filling his own emptiness than about protecting the people around him. That does not make him a monster. But it does make him someone who needs to hear clearly, and probably more than once, that his children's emotional realities are real and cannot simply be overridden every time his desires shift. The thing is, he already proved he can hear that. He got on that call. He made the promise. He understood, at least in that moment, that his actions had weight and that his daughter's feelings deserved to be addressed seriously. He is capable of that recognition. The problem is he seems to have stopped applying it once his own wants moved in a new direction. And the only way forward in a situation like that is to keep being honest, keep holding the line with clarity and without cruelty, and let him figure out whether he wants to be in real relationship with his daughter on terms that actually respect who she is and what she is going through. Her grief, her pregnancy, her baby shower, her family. Those are not negotiable. And she is right to treat them that way. My boyfriend earns $100,000 more than me but demands an exact 50-50 split and calls me entitled for questioning it. $9,000. That is her half of an $18,000 trip. $9,000 that her boyfriend calculated to the cent, presented to her like an invoice, and apparently expected her to hand over without question. And this is the man who earns $100,000 more than she does every single year. This one got me immediately because the sheer confidence of that bill presentation is something else. He did not ask if she was comfortable. He did not check in about the financial gap between them. He just pulled up his spreadsheet and told her what she owed. On a vacation they went on together. Romantically. So let us lay out the facts clearly. because context matters a lot here. She is 36. He is 51. There is a 15-year age gap, and more relevantly, there is a $100,000 annual income gap. That is not a small difference in earnings. That is a different financial world entirely. One of them can absorb a $9,000 trip charge and move on with their month without thinking twice about it. The other one might be looking at months of careful budgeting and quiet stress just to recover from a single vacation they took together. The math is not the same for both of them, and pretending otherwise is not fairness. It is just arithmetic dressed up as a principle and handed to her like it is something she should feel grateful for. On the trip itself, the cost split was already uneven in ways that were somewhat invisible if you were not paying close attention. He used points for his flights. Points, by the way, that represent money he had the resources to earn and save over time, a form of accumulated financial privilege that only works if you have enough disposable income to build it up in the first place. So his flights were already effectively covered by a resource she did not equally have access to, and that fact was apparently not factored into anything. Then they split hotels across different cities, paid for different meals at different moments, covered different costs here and there as the trip unfolded day by day. And at the end of all of that, after every restaurant and every room and every shared experience, he sat down, opened whatever document he had been maintaining, ran the numbers methodically, and arrived at a figure that was exactly half of the total. Her portion. $9,000. Presented cleanly. Waiting for her signature. There is something worth noting about the kind of person who does that calculation. Not everyone thinks that way, and in fact most people in romantic relationships do not. Most couples traveling together, especially when there is a meaningful income gap between them, would approach shared finances with some degree of flexibility and warmth. Maybe one person covers certain costs without announcement. Maybe there is a general sense of generosity flowing back and forth and evening out naturally over time. Maybe someone just says, "Hey, do not worry about it, I wanted to do this with you and I have got it covered." The fact that he tracked every single line item across an entire multi-city romantic vacation and then arrived at a precise number tells you something important about how he thinks about money inside this relationship. It is not shared. It is not flowing freely between two people building a life together. It is accounted for. It is managed. It is separated out and returned to its rightful owner at the end of the month. She was careful in how she framed all of this, which I actually respect quite a bit. She said she is not trying to be that entitled girl. She acknowledged openly that she is happy to pay for things and contribute meaningfully to shared expenses. She is not asking to be carried financially or to contribute nothing while he covers everything. She is asking something much more reasonable and much more human. She is asking whether it is actually reasonable to expect two people with wildly different financial situations to split everything perfectly down the middle as if they are roommates dividing a utility bill, as if there is no relationship here, no partnership, no acknowledgement that their lives and their incomes are in completely different places. And that is a completely valid question. It is, honestly, one of the most important questions she could be asking. The 50-50 split model makes a lot of sense when two people are in genuinely similar financial positions. It feels clean and fair. It avoids anyone feeling like they owe the other person something emotionally or financially. It keeps things simple and easy to account for. But when one person earns significantly more than the other, a rigid 50-50 split does not actually produce equality in any meaningful sense. What it produces is a situation where one person is spending a dramatically higher percentage of their income and carrying a much heavier relative burden while the other person barely registers the transaction. Spending $9,000 means something profoundly different depending on what your bank account looks like on the first of the month. The number is the same. The weight of it is not. He has apparently framed her discomfort as entitlement, or at least she is worried that raising any of this makes her look entitled in his eyes. And that framing is worth sitting with for a moment, because it is doing a tremendous amount of work in this situation. calling someone entitled for expressing financial discomfort when a massive income gap already exists is a way of closing a door before the conversation can even walk through it. If she accepts that framing fully, if she takes it on as true and lets it settle into how she sees herself, she stops asking questions. She pays the bill quietly. She absorbs the discomfort. And the dynamic continues exactly as it is, unchallenged and unexamined, for as long as she allows it to. Here is the thing though. Asking for financial equity in a relationship is not the same thing as asking your partner to fund your lifestyle. There is a meaningful and important difference between saying please pay for everything because I deserve it and saying hey, we earn very different amounts. Can we think about how to handle shared costs in a way that actually reflects both of our realities? One of those is entitlement. The other is just a normal, healthy adult conversation about how a relationship works in the real world. The fact that she is questioning herself rather than questioning him is actually a little concerning when you look at it directly. She came to the internet asking whether her discomfort is even valid, as if she needed external permission to find a $9,000 bill from her romantic partner uncomfortable. That tells me something about how the dynamic in this relationship has already started shaping her sense of what she is allowed to feel and what she is allowed to say out loud. What would a healthy version of this conversation look like? It would look like two people sitting down together and acknowledging openly that their incomes are genuinely different, and that their approach to shared expenses should probably reflect that reality with some honesty and some care. It might look like a proportional split, where each person contributes a percentage of their income rather than an identical flat dollar amount. It might look like one person covering certain categories of expense entirely while the other covers different ones. It might look like the higher earner naturally absorbing larger shared costs while the lower earner handles smaller recurring ones without anyone keeping a running ledger. There are a lot of workable and loving models for this. What is not a workable model, at least not for a relationship with a six-figure income gap and any real emotional investment, is a rigid 50-50 on every single thing, no exceptions, tracked to the cent, delivered at the end of a romantic trip like a hotel checkout receipt. The proportional split idea is used by a lot of couples for exactly this reason, and it holds up well under scrutiny. If he earns $100,000 more than her annually, he is operating in a fundamentally different financial bracket. A proportional approach would mean each person contributes according to their actual means rather than according to an equal raw dollar amount. The result would feel fair to both people because it is calibrated to their real circumstances rather than imposed over them. Now here is my honest take on this whole situation. The money issue is real and it matters, but the bigger issue might be what the money issue reveals about everything else. A partner who earns dramatically more than you and still insists on an exact 50-50 split, who tracks every expense across a shared romantic vacation and hands you an itemized bill at the end of it, is not just being financially rigid or mathematically tidy. He is telling you something significant about how he sees the relationship itself. He is telling you that his greater resources do not come with any greater sense of responsibility toward the partnership. He is telling you that fairness, in his mind, means identical contributions regardless of identical capacity. And he is telling you that your comfort level and your financial reality are not variables he is particularly motivated to adjust for, because adjusting for them would require him to see you as a partner first and an accountant second. That is not necessarily a deal-breaker on its own, but it is something she needs to look at clearly and honestly without letting the entitlement framing cloud her vision. Because money conversations in a relationship do not usually soften over time. They tend to calcify into patterns that feel permanent. Whatever dynamic is being established right now, the tracking, the billing, the 50-50 rigidity enforced across a 15-year and $100,000 gap, that is the pattern that will still be sitting at the table in 5 years if nothing changes. Is that the version of this relationship she is hoping for? She deserves a partner who at minimum is willing to have an honest and open conversation about how financial differences affect shared life together. Not a partner who hands her a spreadsheet and then questions her character for flinching at the number on it. The discomfort she is feeling is not entitlement. It is information. And she should listen to it. If you made it this far, drop a comment and tell me which story hit harder, because honestly both of these are a lot. And if you found this one, a like and subscribe would mean the world.